The New Balance Tekela V3 Pro. New Balance have gone laceless, and they're claiming to have retained the kinetic stitch to improve the stability while not sacrificing flexibility. Really? Really? What's up guys, I'm James and welcome to Boot Wizard Boot Reviews. Today we are looking at the brand new laceless option from New Balance, the Tekela V3 Pro. This is a complete rework from the previous Tekela models with a whole new upper and New Balance's first ever laceless design. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know and my opinions on this brand new boot in New Balance's Tekela control line, so you can decide whether you want to go and pick these up, because they do cost a pretty penny. Remember to like the video, remember to be subscribed, and let's do this. Pretty much all the changes New Balance have made on this brand new Tekela V3 come in the upper. And aside from the obvious laceless system, the biggest change is that the material is completely different. Gone is that synthetic, almost leather-like upper we got on the V2, and in comes Hypoknit, which is New Balance's equivalent of, say, a prime knit or a fly knit. However, it is different to the fit weave tech that they use on the Furon. Something that has remained from the V2 is the kinetic stitch technology, but it's been applied in a much different way here. It's still the same theory of having raised, stitched areas that have been put into the boot to provide structure and stability, but they're a completely different design and they're far more prevalent on this boot, and they're used for things more than just structure. The structural elements of the kinetic stitch come in three main areas, and they're areas that New Balance have identified that have issues where the boot would overstretch. These are high stretch areas around the boot. One is on the lateral side here, and you can see this thicker, denser area of kinetic stitch. And then on the medial side, you have exactly the same area here. So New Balance have found that these are the areas that stretch and move the most when you're cutting and turning, and they've added basically extra reinforcement in these areas. They've also added a very similar area around here for a high contact pass pad zone. Now, that does obviously make that area a little stiffer, but it also makes the touch on the ball feel fairly solid, and I actually quite like that. It makes passing the ball around feel very punchy. That's not a problem at all. The other area where the kinetic stitch is used is across this colourful area that runs around the front of the boot. So this is basically a striking zone. And I've seen it reported by a couple of places that this is there to provide you with better control on the ball. Now, that's simply not the case, or at least it's misreported. What this is a feedback element. So these raised areas just here are much harder and much stiffer than the rest of the boot. And New Balance, their designers, have not claimed that this is going to give you extra power or better control on your shot. What they have claimed is that it is a target area, hence the colours, and it will give you a feedback element. So if you hit the ball off there, it's like a training tool. You know when you get that feedback from making the contact there that you've hit the ball well, and you can use that and implement it in your game when you're trying to control it. And I have to admit that you do feel that. When you strike the ball using this harder area, you get quite a nice feedback effect, so you know you've made a good solid contact with the ball. Something else that's really nice about the touch here. Sticking with the touch, but going back to our V2 comparison, the V3 has had almost all the foam removed from the upper. So compared to that V2, it doesn't have quite the same plush, elegant feeling that you got from that boot. The V3 is far more bare bones, you're a little bit closer to the ball, and the feeling is much more solid and much more punchy. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a matter of preference, and it is very different. However, with creating this very thin one-piece upper that gets you nice and close to the ball, has some good structural elements to stop the boot overstretching, and even gives you a nice punchy feedback feel through the boot, New Balance have created their very own problem. And it's one that, while it was done for different reasons and done in a completely different way, reminds me of what happened with the Puma Future 19.1, where Puma ended up making their upper very, very stiff to overcompensate for other elements like the net fit. This is exactly what I feel New Balance have done here. They've gone with a laceless boot, and in doing so, they've had to provide extra structure to this boot, and in doing that, they've made the upper very, very stiff. The kinetic stitch that runs through the boot has really stiffened up the upper in pretty much every single area, to its detriment. It's just not comfortable enough, it's not flexible enough, it doesn't mold around your feet well enough. Almost everything about the design of the upper of this boot screams to me that New Balance have been desperately trying to fix the classic laceless problems. Not enough lockdown, not enough responsiveness, not enough stability. And on the whole, I think they've done a really good job in those three areas. This is better in most of those areas than almost any laceless boot on the market, and definitely better than some laced boots as well. They've done a good job, but that has come at a cost. And if you're looking to buy these, you have to weigh up if that's a cost you're willing to pay. And I don't mean how much you're going to have to charge to your credit card to pick them up. I mean in terms of comfort and how stiff this upper is. Are you willing to live with the stiffness of this upper and the reduced comfort and this very un-Tekela-like feel based on what we've come to expect in order to get a laceless boot that does have better stability? There's another couple of elements on the upper that we will discuss as well, but we'll discuss those once I show you the boots on feet because they're primarily related around the fit. After all that, let's talk about something a little bit simpler, the outsole. So this is exactly the same as what you got from the Tekela V2. That's no bad thing. It's nice and stiff and stable through the midfoot. It's a nylon outsole, and the stability through these areas is really, really good. And then you do get a nice flexibility through the forefoot, although this does feel a little stiffer than on the previous generation. I don't know whether that's just me, but once you actually wear these in a bit, that softens up really nicely and you get a good amount of flex. In terms of the stud pattern, that's fairly standard. It's very reminiscent of what you get from Adidas, and again, nothing wrong with it. It does a good job, especially if you're looking to just get maximum contact with your studs in most directions. And the studs themselves are these square studs with rounded edges, and they have little steps in them, little lips, which are also there to provide you with extra traction. And on the whole, I think this does a good job. And it is worth noting that some of the studs are actually angled, so they don't go straight down. They have a slight angle to them, depending on where you would normally push off and what direction you'd be going in, which I think is a nice touch. And on the whole, I don't really have any issues with this sole plate or stud pattern at all. I think New Balance have done a really good job with this one, and this and the Furon outsole I think are both very, very good. The big development for the sole plate isn't a performance-based one, but New Balance do seem to be making a big deal out of it, and it is the fact that they've laser etched this design into the bottom of the boot, which I think is very cool. It's something we haven't really seen before. We saw Puma use laser etching for the upper on their brand new Puma King Platinum, but it's a cool design and it's only there for looks. And the outer area, this kind of midnight blue type effect, that is still wearable, but the laser etch design is very cool. And New Balance have been known to do different things design-wise from boot to boot, even though they would normally be kept the same. And I'd like to see what they do with this laser etching on future colorways of the Tekela, because the options are pretty much endless when it comes to using this technology. So it's only for looks, but it's cool and I like it. Value for money. Now this is another sticking point for me with the Tekela V3 Pro, and it's because it comes in at 240 euros. Now there's a couple of reasons for this. One could be that this is listed as a limited edition boot, and on the whole, New Balance add a premium price to their limited editions. So hopefully we will see the V3 Pro in regular release colorways come in at the regular price point of 220 euros, which is what the regular Furon and regular release Tekela V2s came in at. If 240 euros is to be the standard price for the V3 Pro, I think New Balance could be in a bit of trouble. They're putting a premium on a laceless boot, fine. Adidas do it, they charge 280 euros for their laceless products. The difference being that this has a big N on the side and the Adidas boot has 3 stripes. Now, whether that's right or wrong, consumer demand for Nike and Adidas products is far higher than it is for New Balance, and I think if they are to add this 20 euro premium and put themselves right in the same ballpark as a Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite as standard, then they could be making a rod for their own back. Alright, looks. So the obvious thing, of course, it's laceless, and I don't think that looks bad ever. Laceless always looks pretty clean. And then of course you get this big coloured striking zone, which really does pop off this kind of dark navy, almost midnight navy background. Again, not too bad looking. And this pattern, which is supposedly nature inspired in the kinetic stitch, also doesn't look too bad. I'm not sure how I feel about this giant silver N on this side, which again might even provide a little lateral support, and that kind of sinks into the upper and the kinetic stitch. And then something that's somewhat synonymous with the Tekela is the New Balance, the full wording down the medial side of the boot here, also in that same silver colour. You also get the Tekela firm ground on the back of the heel here, which is exactly the same as you got on the Furon, where it says Furon firm ground. It's an odd thing that they've carried over between both of the boots, but it doesn't make a lot of difference. Matching on the heel just here, which matches into the strike zone. Overall, I don't think it's a bad looking boot. You will have also noticed it has an asymmetrical collar, which reminds me a little of what we got from the Adidas Nemesis in the 18 range, where one side is higher than the other. It's supposedly for comfort. It looks a little strange, but it's not as extreme as the Nemesis one. And again, I don't mind it. On feet, you get the standard Ortholite insole. It's nothing special. It's got a coating on top and it's foam. It is what it is. It's what you get in modern day football boots. And then in terms of the liner, you get a really nice synthetic suede that runs through almost all of the inner of the boot. So that's quite nice. It's thicker through the back third here. It's like there's been an extra layer added. And then there's 2 pods that are designed to lock your heel in place in the back. It's a nice idea. It doesn't work that well for me, and I've had to take wearing this boot very slowly to start with. I've had to kind of break it in over a bit of time just for fear of blisters, because I can feel them coming as I run and I use this boot. So that's something I would be careful of. But as always with laceless boots, there's no adjustability, so it is going to come down to personal preference and your foot type inside the boot. However, New Balance have taken a couple of steps to try and remedy that, and they've kind of taken a leaf out of Nike's book and a leaf out of Adidas's book, because we've got an almost seatbelt style strap that runs around the midfoot of the boot, very similar to what you get on the Nemesis 19 Plus. However, it's not just a strap that attaches at either side. It goes fully into the liner and it runs the length of the boot. So you can get your hand in the top of the strap down the front lacing, the front laceless portion here, but with the rest of the boot, it runs down and flows into here, more so like a tunnel, which reminds me somewhat of what we get on the Tiempo. But again, that still does attach, so it's a little bit more consistent. New Balance have tried to retain some of that Tekela comfort that we've come to know and love through the liner and the feel. If you put your hand in there, it feels really nice, but it just doesn't translate to an on-foot feeling. I don't view this as something that I would put in a comfort boot category. And again, it comes down to the stiffness of the boot. I wouldn't call it uncomfortable, but it disappoints me, because the Tekela 1 especially and the Tekela 2, such comfortable boots, and this has kind of gone away from that formula in a really big way, which is a shame, because it's one of the Tekela's key selling points for me. Something else that is synonymous with the Tekela is the fit, or at least the width of the fit. It was very friendly to people with wide feet, especially the V1 and somewhat the V2. Always a boot I would recommend. However, in this instance, Absolutely not. And that's partly because that seatbelt style construction means that it does squeeze through the midfoot a bit, so it's not great for people with wide feet anyway. But on top of that, getting these on is nigh on impossible. It is such a mammoth task. I had to get my shoehorn out of my Predator box to get these on my feet. It's just such an effort. If you've got a wide foot, I doubt you'll even get these on at all. And then as you are getting them on, there just seems to be a lot of stitching and seams and things like that that run through the boot and that belt itself that just have the option to kind of crease up or bend over, and then you've got to start again or straighten it out. And then you've got, if you don't do that, you've got the option for blisters. These go right into my top 2 boots for being crazy difficult to get on. These are probably the most difficult boots to get on that I own right now. For me, New Balance, as of late, have been on an absolute roll. They did the Tekela V1, great boot. Tekela V2, V1, refined, fantastic boot. The Furon V6, New Balance's best ever speed boot. Really well put together. And I just feel like they've been caught up in some laceless hype. They felt the need to make a laceless boot, and it's been to the detriment of the Tekela name and the New Balance boot lineup as a whole. Now, there is reports that New Balance didn't set out to design a laceless boot, and this is just what came as a result of their studies and their research and how they know the different areas that flex. I call bull flip. It's just not true. They wanted to make a laceless boot. They wanted to enter an area of the market that is highly profitable right now, that Adidas are dominating, and they've done so in a way at the detriment of what was one of my favorite boots on the market. This is not a terrible boot. I made the Puma Future comparison, and this doesn't suffer from issues the same way that that did, to the point where the boot was just terrible. But there's enough here, especially when you compare it to those previous generations that were genuinely great boots that could compete at the top end. And we've got a boot that I just feel a bit let down and disappointed by, considering how good New Balance have been recently, and there's still great elements in here, but it's just too stiff. It's a sad time for the New Balance Tekela, in my opinion. Honestly, let me know what you think. If you picked these up or you want to pick them up, let me know down in the comments. Let me know if you had a better experience than I did. Of course, like the video if you did enjoy this review and you want to get those reviews first, and get subscribed to the channel because I've got all the good stuff coming, as well as right now, coming this week, I will have a full breakdown of 3 boots in the Nike Neighborhood Pack. But that's all from me here today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good one, and I'll see you soon.